Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alright, we'll keep it short and brief. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa salli ala Rasulih al-Kareem. Now we hear the word Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah, the Ayyamul Jahiliyyah, the days of Jahiliyyah. The Jahiliyyah period, it refers to the era before the Prophet ﷺ received revelation in the Arab Peninsula. Into the era of illumination, and that nur came down in that era started when a package came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala containing 5 verses, the first one starting with Iqra, read. Okay? Now, the city of Makkah at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and before, okay, it comprised mostly of pagans, people who worshipped idols. But at the same time, there were very small in number nonetheless. There were people who believed in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, known as the Hanif. Those people who were inclined, okay? And there are some who are more popular than others. For example, Waraqa ibn Nawfal, Khadija radiallahu anha's uncle, who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was brought to. So there were a few personalities who worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and they had no problem, the pagans had no problem with them because they weren't interfering with business. Right? You do your thing, but you just keep it to yourself. Okay? And even with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, their objection, they started objecting when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when that side of the drums were started to get beat, that's when Quraysh were like, whoa, this is going to be bad for business, because everything revolved around the idols. Now, the city of Makkah, you had these group of Hanifs, you had the pagans who were mostly pagans and idol worshippers, but at the same time, there was a lot of traffic in and out of the Haram. And what was that for? Hajj and the trade, mainly. Now, during the course of trade, okay, there were people who were other idol worshippers. And at the same time, the people of the book would also pass by. And they would, so basically throughout the course of time, the people of Quraysh, they picked up different acts, different ways to venerate their idols. Okay? So for example, Salah. Okay, they had a version of Salah, not the same formal prayer that we know, but it came in the form of doing sujood before their idols. So they would do sujood during the sunrise, during the sunset, and right at when the sun would be in its zenith. Okay? And this is why there is a prohibition of the Prophet ﷺ to do such at this time. So you had fasting, you had tawaf. And now some of these things were inherited from Ibrahim ﷺ, although they were diluted and watered down. Okay? Then you also had the act of worship known as sacrifice. They would sacrifice, but not for Allah. They would sacrifice for their idols. They would make oaths. They would make pledges that if this thing happens, I'm going to do this. So all of these acts of worship were bits and pieces that they took from other passing by religious people or whatever the situation may be. And on top of that, they held the people of the book in high regard. Okay? When the Prophet ﷺ went Quraysh, where did they go? Who did they consult with? They went to the ulama of Yahud. They went to that consultancy group. Right? They consulted with them and they came back. Okay, answer these questions. So the people of the book were held in high regard. Okay? So they wanted to do things that they did. So this were one of the practices that they brought was fasting. Now they had 2 versions of fasting in front of them. From the Jews, they picked up the fasting that included no eating, no drinking, etc. But at the same time, you had the Nasara and their version of fast somewhere so that you could ponder on the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these became practices. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do for 6 months prior to revelation? What did he do? He would seek isolation in a cave and not talk to anyone. He would just isolate himself. So these were practices that the Quraysh had picked up, a little bit from here, a little bit from there. Legend has it that once upon a time, the people of Makkah, they went through a severe drought. And they realized that this was a punishment from, legend has it that they consulted with the Ahlul Kitab, legend has it that they came up with their own idea, but what they did, they understood Ashura, the 10th of Muharram, to be a sacred day. And this is something that was sent past from the previous religions. The Prophet ﷺ also mentions in a hadith that this is a day, a day in which the Prophet ﷺ said, يوم عاشوراء كانت تصومه الأنبياء فصومه أنتم. This is a day that all prophets observed, so you fasted as well. So they had this. So what did they do? They fasted on the day of Ashura, a practice of fasting on the day of Ashura. So it's kind of like their Thanksgiving. It became like their Thanksgiving. Lo and behold, Aisha radiallahu anha says, now I'm setting up the stage for you, and I'm going to quote this hadith and we're going to call it a night. Aisha radiallahu anha says that the Prophet, that كانت قريش تصوم عاشوراء في الجاهلية. Ashura was a day that was observed by the Quraysh in the times of Jahiliyyah. وَكَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ يَصُومُ. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would also observe the fasting. Not because the Quraysh did. Okay, because it was a sacred holy day nonetheless, Ashura, all the way till the end of his life. And then a change came in that after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did hijrah, and we will talk about that tomorrow. جزاكم الله خير.